So today I was asked, why is it that sometimes people are so disgusted by trans people? And so I am an expert on this subject, as I have myself felt disgust for trans people. This came from my past. It is no longer my current state of being. I no longer experience that disgust. But I can at least answer why this individual, from this perspective, felt disgust. And I think that it is not just trans people. I think disgust towards our fellow humans is an experience that we have. And I think it is something worth exploring. So let me first talk about my experience, which I can validate through my own personal testimony, and I can tell you why I have felt the way that I have felt. And that will shed at least a little bit of light on the general topic. I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian home. People who generally said that the Bible at face value was an inspired word from a divine being that was truth. And from there was lots of interpretations and explanations for how we would to interpret the Bible. But there were some things that were for the most part agreed upon. In the congregation I grew up in, hell was almost a certainty for some individuals. And people who continued to sin and disobey the will of God would be sent to hell after they died if they did not repent and turn to Jesus. There were certain things that were clear signs that you were not doing the will of God and that you were in rebellion to Him. One of those things was sexual immorality. I, as a young man, full of primal instinct, full of lust, had a very hard time with this, as I was not supposed to use that lust and express it in any way. And I found myself being very disgusted by myself. We can go further into that, but before we do, let's take a deeper look into what disgust is. I think something that we can all share a fairly common ground on is the disgust of smelling rotten food. And why is it that rotten food is so disgusting to us? It's because our ancestors, over time, have learned that rotten food is deadly, that it's harmful. And over time, we have passed down that memory and that attitude towards rotten meat. That's one explanation, and I think it's reasonable. But oftentimes, our primal natures are disgusted by things that are harmful. Not always, and it's not always a pure, sure sign, but it's a tendency. And therefore, things that threaten us can sometimes be triggered by the sensation of disgust or our perception of threat. For me as a young boy, I was disgusted by my own body when I masturbated, when I looked at pornography, and I felt utter disgust for this nature that was within me. Even if it was just thinking about it, it was wrong. And even up until my adult life, I had a hard time even accepting my own body because I was disgusted by my sexual organs. I had a hard time really looking at myself and thinking that there was anything beautiful about it. And I didn't realize it until I was older. So I was disgusted by my own body. Why? Well, because these sexual urges, these desires, this core, just fundamental aspect of my body and my animalistic habitual nature would send me to hell. I was going to die and burn forever. Do you realize how scary that is? As a young child, when you truly believe that, eternal torment, hand on the fire, just get close. I would get close to the fire to feel how hot it was. And that was enough to be disgusted by anything that would send me there. And that was my perception at that time. So how does this come into be with trans people? Well, There are several verses in the Bible that would lead devout religious people to believe that changing your gender identity or changing your sex, engaging in certain sexual activities, being lustful, changing your gender. There's a verse in Revelation that talks about the effeminate, people who are wearing women's clothes kind of thing is the feel. There's lots of verses, you can find them. There's plenty of information in there to get that opinion. And so I remember being graduated from college and seeing a trans person. And I knew that I should love this person because at that point I had come to really understand Jesus to a level that I knew that he loved the sinful people who would go to hell. He loved them, and I knew I needed to love this person. But I couldn't help but feeling a revolting feeling inside of myself. Some part of me felt that the nature that was in this person was harmful to me. It was my perception that it was harmful, that it was somehow wrong. And so, through this specific religious tradition, I acquired that. And even today, there are moments in time where I can feel a sensation that does not agree with how I intellectually think about a person. And that comes oftentimes from my past experiences. And so all of this to say, we oftentimes are not aware enough of why we feel the way we feel. We are not aware enough of why we feel disgusted to truly be able to engage with that conversationally. We just have a feeling. But I think the first step to resolving that problem, at least as an individual, is to accept that we feel that feeling and there is a reason for it. And to acknowledge that when people feel disgusted by us, there is a reason for them feeling that feeling. And we can at least acknowledge that there is a reason behind it. I think every individual has to decide for themselves how to interact with people who disagree with them, and how to interact with people who feel threatening. But bear in mind, I, as a person who is feeling disgust by someone who is trans, I loved them and I wanted to show love. I'm sure they probably felt put off by me at that time. I wanted to show love, but there was an innate instinctual primal fear that was unconsciously governing me and my responses. And I've done enough work to figure that out and understand why I felt the way I felt. Now that is just from one perspective. I've done enough internal introspection to understand why I have felt a certain way. Somebody putting on different clothes, changing their bodies in certain ways, having different identities, that brings no harm to me as an individual. But it felt like it did. Something within me clamped down and really genuinely felt like I was in danger, even if I couldn't express it, even if I didn't understand it. And so I think it's important to realize that whatever it is, I imagine Hitler probably felt that way with the Jews, right? There was probably some reason he genuinely felt utter hatred for them. And I'm not saying it was a good thing, not saying that I don't know why that happened. I don't want that to happen anymore. But I think in order for us to start resolving those issues and prevent cases where there is unnecessary disgust, unnecessary conflict, unnecessary threat, we have to evaluate ourselves and learn why we feel the way we feel and express that honestly as we can. And of course, we're not going to resolve every situation in this life. There are going to be many times probably where that other person cannot see. But oh, a treasure it is when you can resolve those issues within yourself. When you can understand that this person is evoking a response in me. And when you can truly understand why you feel that way. And when you can understand that that person feels a certain way, and to the degree that you are safe, to the degree that you feel secure within yourself, might as well learn why that person feels that way and help them understand why they feel that way. This video is simply to talk about why I felt disgusted around trans people when I used to be a fundamentalist, Bible-believing Christian. And my testimony is also an example to anyone who is curious about why they feel a certain way about certain topics. I used to feel that way about homosexuality as well. And I couldn't even stand looking at men kiss. Now I have no problem with it. But underlying all of it, although I loved homosexual people, although I wanted good, I wanted the Jesus embracing all love, there was some fundamental primal fear within me that said, danger, Will Roberts, danger. And I didn't understand why I felt that way. And I was too afraid to question it. Because when the burning fire of hell is right there in your mind, you don't even want to question it. What if you start engaging in those things? What if you start believing the wrong beliefs that lead you to the wrong actions? Well, it's hell to pay. And that is terrifying. As a young child, I was terrified, absolutely afraid. And when you have that kind of fear, no logic or reason can penetrate it. I think there are ways that we can work around it and deal with it and expose it, but I think one of those ways is to talk about it and to be honest with ourselves that I have been part of the problem, that I have been a part of the equation that brings hostility into a world when I want peace. I am a part of the problem. We all are part of the problem of why there's conflict. So let us take responsibility for what part is ours. Take care of yourself. Protect yourself. Do what you need to do to survive. And once you have done that and you've created that space for yourself, then look and inquire as to why is it that these people hate me? Why is it that this person acts this way? And truly try and understand it as if you were them. Because then you will have better intel. And when you have better intel, you can make better choices as to how to disengage or interact with someone. If there are other questions that anybody would like to ask me, I would love to share my perspective. And this is a transmission from the Voice of Melchizedek, my channel, where I express my authentic and spiritual perspective. Please subscribe if you're interested to hearing more, and please ask me if you have more questions.